Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to The Truth is Barrel Proof. I'm Jack Bigadoo. You also know me as the Hood Sommelier. A lot of first this month. There is so many first because honestly, I usually know about a brand, then I reach out to them because I thought maybe their history is fascinating and I want to talk to them. But this one was more of a surprise. I've seen this brand around. I really never been curious about it because I just thought corn, okay, we know bourbon make corn, but or corn makes bourbon, but this one about 3 weeks ago, almost a month ago, a friend of mine invited me to a tasting and he said, "Have you ever had this whiskey?" And I said, "Well, I've seen it online, but never been interested." He said, gotta, you gotta have it. And I'm like, okay, it cannot be that great. And he said, you tell me, you are the hood sommelier. You tell me. And at the first sip, first thing I told the person is, I have to talk to these people. Who are they? What are they doing? And for all of you guys who think good bourbon only comes from Kentucky, you're going to be very disappointed today because this is not a Kentucky bourbon. This is about heritage. This is about the quality of what type of grain you use to make your whiskey and a family history. His name is Scott Blackwell. He was so gracious, so gracious. I reach out to a lot of brands, but for someone to actually be responsive like this and just be so friendly, he told me already the type of person I'm dealing with. I don't know this man beside from emails, but I already call him my friend. So Scott Blackwell, welcome to the Truth is Barrel Proof. Welcome to my house.
Well, thank
Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for coming here and telling us about what you do.
no, my pleasure. And likewise, we've had good exchanges, so it was fun. And I've watched you on Instagram, so I kind of voyeuristically knew who you were. So not fair, but yeah, always enjoyed your
It's but
explaining.
again, a lot of people know me from the web, but not a lot of people have that same reaction you've had. It wasn't anything like, oh, I know this guy. It was more like, oh, you want to talk? I'll be more than happy to talk. And for me, that level of enthusiasm is needed more in the industry because more people should be happy to talk about their whiskey and be happy to sit for 30 or 40 minutes and tell people about their whiskey. So for me, it was very, very much so out of pure curiosity. I didn't know who Scott Blackwell was. I still don't know who he is. I'm about to ask the question. But for me, it was just first impression matters. And your first impression, as far as I'm concerned, was golden. So thank you for being who you are. You already tell me the type of person you are and how you like to handle business. So thank you for being on the show. For the people that don't know, we obviously know you in some part of whiskey, but for the people that do not know you, who is Scott Blackwell?
Wow. I have a gift of gab, but I'll keep it short. I would say probably if you had to have a couple of words to explain or to sort of describe me, it would be curious and probably tenacious.
All
So
right.
I have been in the food business my entire life. I started off like a lot of middle schoolers, high school, washing dishes in a restaurant because that's where you start, and then have worked my way up and been in all sorts of different types of restaurants from fast food to fine dining. And I've been in the back and I've been in the front. And I kind of got pigeonholed after a while. Those all of a sudden were the only jobs I kind of could get, because people were like, well, you've got a lot of experience in the restaurant business. Maybe you ought to just keep working there. And I'm like, well, I don't want to work there anymore. So, I sort of fell backwards into being self-employed. I started a business. I didn't call it a business, but I started a business in college, and making desserts for restaurants. And it was out of my apartment, completely on the down low. And it was like cutting grass or babysitting. It wasn't like a business. It was just cash. I needed money, and I made more money doing that than I did making minimum wage at whatever, $3.15 an hour back then, So, and then when I got out of school, like I say, those jobs, unemployment was pretty high. This would have been in the 80s. And my friends were getting real jobs and seeing what they made. And I just was like, I'm making as much money, if not more than you. And it seems silly that I'm doing this, but that I can make money doing this, but it's working for now. But I didn't think it was anything permanent. But, you fast forward, and I was always very interested and curious and wanted to, I love, I love flavor. Who doesn't? But I love where flavor comes from. And I'm, sort of want to dig back to, if I get in, kind of enthusiastic about something, I want to understand, why are you getting this, and where is it coming from, and how do you do this? And I think that's where that curiosity pays off. And it's just sort of been a common thread, really back to that first business. This is business number 6 for me. And they've all been, that's that thread. And I'd never distilled, didn't know anything about it, to be honest. When my wife, Ann, came up with the idea, she really pushed I was brewing beer at our house, and I thought I was making more like Belgian style, like Kolsch's and Saisons and things of that nature. And I really thought that that's what I wanted to do, because I love that style of beer. And she was like, I don't really want to do beer. What about spirits? And I'm like, so here we are. So I just use that.
So shout out to your wife. She's the reason why we have this beautiful project come to fruition in front of us. Who say wives don't know best, right?
Oh yeah.
No, it's actually fun. So you're segueing into my next question is, you go from the food industry making, obviously you are a hustler, like we say nowadays, you hustle. Start making beer at home. Wife say, has she always been a whiskey drinker, or is this something that she saw as an opportunity and which year was that? How far ago are we talking?
This would have been 2010, 2011.
Wow.
And she was, when I met her, she drank, her whiskey of choice, go to, just sort of like if you're out and, kind of available everywhere kind of whiskey. She liked other things, but her go-to was Maker's Mark, because it was, I don't know, that was just what she preferred. At her house, she had a bottle of Maker's Mark on her home bar, and she wasn't a collector or into that, but she grew up. Her parents, her dad would get home from work and they would have a cocktail, and we'd have a lot of his old decanters and so she had that sort of history. I did not. I did not really drink whiskey. I drank gin when I was growing up, and people thought that was like peculiar. My friends drank vodka, and I was like, I want flavor. So I drank gin, but I drank, like I say, once craft beer came along, and probably the first, and I would say the beer that sort of still sticks with me is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. That beer, it's just like you got to, Sierra Nevada has stood the test of time, and just sort of having that laser sort of dogged focus. Fritz Maytag, of course, with Anchor, and Liberty Ale was the other one that, probably a little too narrow, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was her, and she was looking at the beer data and reading. We owned another company at this point. We had a packaged food, an organic and natural bake, like place and bake, called Immaculate Baking. So you'd like cookie dough and biscuits, like cinnamon rolls and stuff. So it would have been like Nestle and Pillsbury, but organic. So just the little pieces of dough you take home and you put on a pan and you bake it. That's what we did before. Well, we had raised a fair amount of money from outside venture capital because we were growing extremely fast, and we knew the writing was on the wall when we took that money in. This business is going to get sold.
Correct.
So we were just sort of at that point of 2010, 11, we were like, well, what are we going to do next? Because we're not going to make enough. And also, we're too young to just stop. So we started looking around. And like I say, beer was just sort of I'd always loved craft beer, and I love wine, but wine, we don't really make wine in South Carolina. So that would have been a major move. But so she was looking at that beer data, and always at the bottom at that point, there were like a couple little sentences or paragraphs about craft distilling. And she was like, what about distilling? And I'm like, who has one of those? I know the guys, and the big guys, those guys have like factories, those guys, but also like they make good product, unlike beer where you've got like Budweiser or whatever. And then here comes Sierra Nevada. Very different. Okay, we're a little guy. We come along and there's this big place that's been in business 100 years. They make a good product. How do we differ from that? And what do we bring to the party? So that's where it all sort of started.
I want to be a fly on the wall when you and her are having a conversation. It seemed like you're telling the PG version of the story. I'm sure not two people coming up with just very wild idea, but both of you seem to be big entrepreneurs. So, which means that you probably are people that are risk adverse to actually try something new. Obviously, have owning a few businesses. You kind of, I feel like I always tell it is like kind of riding a bicycle. You a couple times you tumble, and then after that you're like, what's the worst that can happen, right? So, um, but there is something particular also about your history because from the name immediately, right? I didn't know I was looking for Jimmy Red the whole time, but in reality, it's High Wire Distilling. So you think of a great idea that is called craft in. Where do you start? You know a little bit about distilling. She's also from the food side, but likes bourbon. Where do you go from there? You're also not nowhere near the capital of where bourbon is known as well.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we're both from South Carolina. We were both born in South Carolina. I lived in Miami when I was a kid, and it was very eye-opening for me. I kind of wanted to leave here, to be honest. I mean, just not really. And so we were sort of looked at the map, but we have family in the area, and it was sort of like aging family. And it was like, we can't really like pick up and go to like California or, it was like, love the idea, but, it's kind of like real, just sort of looking at reality. So we looked at the general landscape, and we always loved Charleston because, it's a bit of, it's very different here than the rest of the state. it's more cultural. It has a lot, just we've got a lot of tourists that come here. We've got like almost 8 million tourists that visit here a year. So we've got an incredible food scene. So we knew that. And then I knew a guy up in Asheville. We were living in Greenville up in the upstate at this point. And I knew a guy in Asheville that owned a brewery, had been around forever, Highland Brewing, a guy named Oscar Wong. And he and I used to do a radio show together, beer and baking. And we would eat my, cookies and stuff and drink his beer and talk about, it was just sort of a silly thing. But we, there was always sort of this idea. And at this point, we, talked about the idea of what, he was getting older and it's like, what are you going to do with your business? And he was like, well, my daughter's not that interested. So there was some moment where it was like, well, maybe we ought to buy this business, And one day we were up at his place and he said, hey, and this was after my wife had mentioned the distilling thing. And this all happened in a very short period of time. He says, walk next door with me. I just rented a space to this distillery. And I'm like, okay. This would have probably been 2011 or so. And I walked next door and there's this setup and these people have bought all this really nice equipment and they're distilling like crazy. I'd really never been up close to a still. I'd seen them on TV and, sort of the hillbilly type stuff and on TV, but I hadn't seen like a small craft distillery. We just didn't have them around here. And so, the alcohol is pouring out and I'm like, being perfectly honest, it looked kind of boring, but as I got to the smells in there were incredible, the fermentation and all that, of course. And I was like, this is kind of interesting, but this seems very scientific and like over my head. Yeah. We got to know these folks and not too long after that, a guy was in the area that was working with them as a consultant. And I'd been sort of starting to research the business, a guy named Dave Pickerell. Oh. And Dave,
today's a special day. May he rest in peace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we met him and we said hey, we're thinking about, and he's like, yeah. And he goes, if you need help, let me know. And we were like, we are definitely going to need help. And so he, fast forward, we flew out to Portland, Oregon, because there was only a concentration of craft distilleries in Portland in the whole United States. I think there were like 12 in Portland. And I didn't want to go to Kentucky and see big places. It's like, okay, I know what a factory looks like. I want to see people like us.
The craft.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sort of what we can do and the infrastructure we would have. So that's sort of how it all came about. And we went in a couple of smaller guys at first and they were fermenting in like plastic drums and I was like, I don't want to go that far. Like, I want to be a little more, further down the road. And so the third place we went with was House Spirits. And we met Christian Krogstad, who started that, and they were making aviation gin at that point, that day. And he had made, but had not ever released any single malt at that point. And we tried some of that out of a barrel and I was like, whoa, I've never had anything like that. And that was like piqued my interest. And I'm like, okay, there's new flavors. There are new flavors out here to be explored. This could be interesting. It's not necessarily single malt, but just there, maybe those guys in Kentucky kind of do what they do, but maybe there's a little bit more to venture out and kind of look at here. So the seeds were starting to get planted. And by this point, we ended up getting to be such good friends with the guys in Asheville. They were upgrading equipment. Their still was about a year old, and we bought that still and leased a place in downtown Charleston. We knew we were moving here, and Dave came down for our very first run. sat in here at our house, and we sat for several days, and I just took notes feverishly over mash bills and yeast and all the tools, the hydrometers, and all the things you kind of had, because I knew nothing about any of it. Pumps, it was like definitely like going to school. And then we talked about different grains, fermentation temperatures. And then we made some mashes, and we made some whiskey. And he turned the still on. He was the first one to do it, and he showed me how to do it. And then we sort of went through that, and it got to be toward the end
like
of
an apprentice almost.
Yeah, definitely. And then by the end of that tenure, he looked at me and Ann, and he was literally, his hand was on the door. He said, "You know what? You guys have the grain and fermentation knowledge from your previous business, and you have some of this distribution knowledge. But if I can leave you with one thing that you just need to be thinking about is you can't out maker's mark."
Okay, that's a good advice.
Yeah, and we knew what he meant. He just basically said, you can't go get, yellow corn and red winter wheat and go 16 or 18 or 12% and, make it on and it's not gonna be remarkable enough.
Correct. Trying to exactly copy and paste style of doing things. I kind of see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's ultimately sort of how it all. I mean, it was a very short period of time. We sold our business December 31st of 2012. We signed a lease that month on the building, and we made our first distillation in June of 13 with Dave. Yeah, it was fast. And then we opened our doors in September of that year, in the fall of 13.
Wow.
And at that point, we made clear spirits. We made, gin, and because we had neutral spirit, we made vodka. Because it's like, well, people probably want to buy vodka.
What I like to call those, we need to keep the lights on spirits.
Yeah. And that barely kept the lights on, I mean, the gin probably more so. And then we started messing around, a lot of dirt roads. I mean, a whole lot.
But I think really what makes obviously you as a brand stand out from my perspective is what I'm gonna show the folks is this. Right. So we heard of all of it, from this type of yellow corn to make bourbon, and this type of grade of, some people use even black corn from Peru in some way. This Jimmy Red out of left field. What is Jimmy Red? Because I see you guys have researched it. You've talked to a few people, knowing how you are. I'm sure you took your time to know more about it. Did you follow Dave's advice and say, you know what, maybe we should look at yellow corn? Or how did that come about?
Yeah, so we live in the land of grits. So there are a lot of grit makers around here, and cornmeal, because of that. Because when you mill for grits, you end up with cornmeal no matter what. So a lot of cornbread and a lot of grits, and the breadings around here for shrimp and things like that are usually cornmeal. So we're surrounded by it, but we ventured out at first, and I thought, well, there are these heirloom corns over, this guy makes grits. Let's get some stuff from him. And then and then we tried a white corn, a yellow corn. They were heirloom. But, I just sort of in my gut, I was like, that's the stuff we made with Dave, to be honest. That first time were some, I think, white corn, heirloom white corn bourbon. And I was just like, this is cool, but I don't really, it's not hitting me.
It's not wowing you
So
at all.
no. And we were messing around with Carolina Gold rice, which there's a big old rice culture here. And we were playing around with the polishings from the rice, so that bran, so we were trying a lot of different things. And then we did some like alt whiskeys, that weren't even bourbon, and this would have been probably December of that same year. So this was all moving very fast. We were starting to play around with, like I say, all sorts of things during that first 3 months. But I would lay awake at night at 3 a.m. and just be like, have a lot of angst around how maybe this is a mistake and, things of that nature. But I thought, I was also reading all these forums at that point, and all these people were on there going, well, what's your mash bill? What's yours? And they would be like, well, I'm using 18%. Well, I'm going to use 4 grains, or I'm going to use 5 grains, or I'm going to use rye because wheat sucks or whatever. And I'm just like, why is the flavoring grain wheat or rye? What is the corn? It's 70+% of the mash bill. What is that? And then I'd read like the barrel is 50 to 60% of the flavor.
Right.
And I'm like, well, if you think about it from a food perspective, you've got a white mushroom that you buy at the grocery stores that, boring, just, nothing wrong with it. But you cook that mushroom, there's not a whole lot of flavor. What it does is it picks up the garlic or the onion or the red wine or the steak jus or whatever it is, and kind of becomes that. It's a sponge, and it tastes really good because it's like, that onion or that white wine or whatever is in there, and that's in the butter or whatever. But it's like a chicken breast, versus a leg. There's not a whole, a chicken breast. You kind of got to marinate that or do something to it.
Something.
And so I thought, but if you throw a shiitake or a hen of the wood or a portobello, okay, now you don't have to do all that because that mushroom has a lot of flavor. And just like any plant in, be it coffee, cacao, so for chocolate, things of that nature, wine grapes, Pinot versus Cabernet versus Schioppettino or Ribolla Gialla or whatever it is, they're all going to have something different. So I thought maybe we need to dive into corn and learn more, since it's the big, kahuna in that mash bill.
That's literally what makes bourbon. So yeah.
So we thought about, who do we know that knows a lot about kind of all the different heirlooms around here. And there's this guy named Glenn Roberts who owns Anson Mills, and he sells grain to chefs all over the country, all over the world. He just happens to be based here in South Carolina. So we have this sort of village, if you will, of, like I say, this great culinary scene with all these great chefs and all this stuff happening right around us. So we just started looking kind of around here and thinking, let's just talk to these people. Why do we need to figure this out? And we called him, and he said, we said, we want to learn more about corn. And he said, well, meet me down at Clemson University. They have a research center south of town. And I met him down there at the end of that year. And he had a table full of seeds, a 6-foot table of all sorts of seeds, different corns. And he's going through, this one has a ton of starch, and this one has you see this, it's got this oil in it, and just what kind of mouthfeel you're going to get from it and all that kind of stuff. And what kind of grits you're going to make. And he's going through probably 50 different varieties. And I'm looking at this pile in the middle, this red pile, and I'm like, I said, hey, toward the end, I said, hey, what's that red pile? And he goes, oh, that's Jimmy Red. That's James Island Red. James Island's right over here over the river. And that's the one you want. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, cool. That's, that was easy, and I said, I would love to get some and make a small batch.
See what that.
He's like, well, what's a small batch? How much do you need? And I said, like 800 to 1,000 pounds. And he was like, you guys are grain hogs, because he's used to selling like 5-pound bags to chefs. And here we are, we're going to use 800 or 1,000 pounds for a test. And he's like, doesn't exist. If you want that, you're going to have to grow it. And, and he points to this guy, Brian Ward, Dr. Brian Ward, who's the PhD that runs that center. He goes, maybe Brian here will grow it for you, but that kind of poundage doesn't exist. So, but I'll give you the seed, and if Brian will grow it, but you're going to have to write a check, and I mean a big check, to Clemson to get this to happen. And he's like, he's not smiling. He's kind of, and I knew I was like, he's testing me. So I said, sure. Yeah, let's do it. And I'm thinking, how much is he talking about? But I'm also like, we have to do something here. We have to try something. So I go back to the distillery. There's only 3 of us in the distillery at this point. It's me and Ann and this jack of all trades guy that we have. And she's like, well, how'd it go? And I said, well, there's this corn, and well, can we get some? Well, we're going to have to grow it. And I said, she goes, well, what's the story with that? And I said, he said, we're going to have to write a check, a big check. And she goes, well, how much? And I was like, I didn't ask. I was like, but we need to do this. We got to figure out how to do it. And I knew it wouldn't be, exorbitant. And at the end of the day, it was fine. But we did that. We grew a little over 2 acres. We also, in tandem, we learned a lot about open pollinated varieties and how they'll cross up. So we did, we had a small plot that we bagged the cobs with paper bags, and then we bagged the tassels, and that way you can't cross pollinate. And then we pulled pollen from the tassels when they started creating pollen. And then we went around with a paintbrush and painted pollen on the silks, and then put the bags back on. And that way we kept a strain. It's a population, but we kept that strain, and that way we had some seed for next year. So that was sort of that first year. And then I had not been on a farm. I mean, I'd driven by plenty of corn. I, probably drank beer in high school in a cornfield, but, drove by them, but I had never really been on them and didn't know a whole lot about it. But I ran behind that tractor when they put the seed in the ground. And then I went out every week and watched it pop up and get taller and taller and taller. And this corn grows to about 10 to 14 feet tall.
That's pretty tall.
And it's gangly, and 2 to 3 ears per stalk, big, nice big, like 14-inch, usually 12 to 16 rows around is what the typical is. And then we didn't own a mill, so Glenn said, I'll mill it for you, but I want to mill it and get you the fresh meal every day. So we made 2 batches, and we had been making, like I say, by this point it was September, so it had been a year.
No pun intended, but you jimmied this whole thing.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah.
But you jimmied this whole thing. It just seemed like you're like, hey, we go try this, and I want to try this. I've been doing this for a while. Everybody have kind of a crafted story. It's a Cinderella story. You hear all the beauty and thing, and you're probably one of my first guests that actually is giving it to me again raw. You're like, this is what happened. I got this guy here. I did this, and we tried it. We wanted some different. We didn't even know what we were getting ourselves into. So it is so astonishing and for me quite fascinating that you're literally a risk taker, truly what we call a true Americana story, where someone tries something, they have a little bit of conviction, a little bit of gumption, and I'm sure those sleepless, when you talked about you having ends and sleepless nights, I felt that in my core, because as a business owner myself, I know how that feel like when you don't know if the family is gonna eat next month, if anything is gonna happen, and this weird dream you have is actually gonna come to fruition. So I could understand that. So
Right.
now we have the corn. Now we have somebody who is milling it for you. Did you decide to go 100% corn?
Yeah. So we thought, let's not put wheat or rye in, because let's taste what the corn tastes like first by itself. It wasn't really an intentional, like, we're going to do something like this and not have wheat or rye in there. So
Right.
we made it. We like I say, the first year we got, I mean, that first batch, we got the bag, the tote, and opened it up, and you could clump this in your hand, unlike the white or yellow heirlooms we had been working with, and it would form a snowball, but it smelled like peanut butter, which didn't smell like corn. And it was
Right.
like, that's different.
Correct.
And then when we were mashing it, once the conversion started happening, we were using enzymes. And once we started seeing that conversion happen, the sweetness was different. It was more of like a honey sweetness versus just sugar.
Correct.
Um, and so different than the yellow corn or the white corn. It had that earthier flavor to it.
Right.
Then when we moved to the fermenter, the next day we walked in and there was this thick oil cap on top that we had not been seeing, and stuck my finger in it, and it was just pure oil. And my wife said, it smells like banana Laffy Taffy. And it definitely had a very, very different smell than the other fermentations we've been working with. And we move, everything typical on the grain. So we move everything over, yeast and all, oil, pumps it over into the still, and then we're distilling it, and the white dog's coming off, and that you can even see the little pearls of oil in the distillate.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
and and so it was sort of, viscosity was different.
Correct.
And
Now,
and
now, now I'm salivating. I definitely need to try this for quite interesting. I have the classic. I'm assuming that's what your flagship is this classic Jimmy Red. Um, Very interesting. First time I'm seeing any bottle with almost like a bakery cover on top of it. Whose
right,
idea was this? Was it your
my
wife?
wife.
Was it you?
Yeah, my wife. Yeah,
Okay.
and it was sort of a, you know, we it was a it was a mashup. So it's sort of like that Worcestershire packaging, or Angostura bitter, where you wrap the
Right.
bottle. That kind of cool. But then at the same time, it was kind of an inside joke, because in this state you couldn't sell a bottle of liquor without it being in a bag. Had
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
there was you would call it brown bagging. And so when you would see people outside the store nipping on a pint or something, it
Yeah.
was in a bag.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of a joke there. But also we just thought, that'll kind of tie the brands together, um, across. So if you see that, it's us.
No,
Um,
that does set you apart. Beside the
yeah,
beautiful label for me, which highlight what you guys did clearly on the label, sweet mash, classic, Jimmy Red, which makes you ask the question, what is Jimmy Red? And I think that's where I started getting into and started asking, what is this? So I'm loving the history behind it. Let's talk about expressions that came out of the distillery. First, why high wire distillery? And then the expression of the bottle is Jimmy Red.
so Highwire, there again, when we started, we didn't know what, I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing. You know, there was no business plan, to be honest. You know, and we knew we wanted to make something unique and bring something unique forward. We make a gin that is called Hat Trick, which is delicious. It's different label, you know, it's a hat. It says Hat Trick and High Wires on the back. But we also saw where there were a lot of other distilleries starting to pop up pretty quickly, and everybody had a vodka or a gin. And I was like, well, this is like the IPA of the beer world. You know, this is like, you know, it's a kind of a easier entry, lower barrier. And, you know, before we knew it, we were the first gin around here. And, you know, before we knew it, there were like 9 gins, you know, in just here, you know, so it's like, okay. So while we think we made a really great one, it was just sort of like, well, we really wanted to make whiskey. But we didn't know what that meant. And, you know, it's funny because I used to go in liquor stores and I used to look at all the bottles, and it was like, I didn't know what, I mean, I knew what Scotch was or what bourbon was, but you look around, I didn't know all the, you know, I'm talking, you know, when I was younger, I didn't know what all the brands were. And, you know, it was the 80s. So it was, you know, kind of a rough time, you know, in that industry, in the whiskey industry. And, you know, then after being involved in this and making gin and whiskey, and we made an agricole style rum out of fresh cane juice. And I was like, wow, this is all agricultural based products.
Yep.
And so when you look at that liquor store, or, you know, and when you go in our tasting room and that wall of bottles, it's all representative of agriculture. And that, you know, is you know, as you start to dive deeper back into that, it's a, you know, we think and we compare ourselves more to winemakers than spirit makers. We are friends with a lot of winemakers. We sort of can finish each other's sentences. We kind of we approach it more from that angle. And we were buddies with more winemakers than we were spirit makers way back, you know, regionally. And so, you know, now whenever people say, well, what is High Wire? I'm like, well, we're an agriculturally focused distillery. So we are focused on the agriculture because that is ultimately where the flavor starts.
Correct.
And if this grain to glass thing, to me, is meaningless. Of course it's grain. That's what whiskey is. That's kind of like saying water is clear. It doesn't hold. It does. It's like it's being overused and therefore kind of watered down.
Absolutely.
So and it doesn't really tell you anything.
Correct.
So we have, High Wire gave us an umbrella to explore flavors that were around here. So we make a peach brandy from, you know, South Carolina.
You literally do it all. You experiment with everything.
Well, we ultimately are curious about flavor and sort of how can we coax something out of you know, something that's grown and create something from that and sort of celebrate that. So that's ultimately we make peach brandy one day a year. It's not, you know, it's not a, you know, but 300 other days a year or whatever, we're making whiskey, you know, and we're making Jimmy Red, and we make a little bit of rye.
Okay. So now I'm looking at all your expressions. I went on the website, looked at all the expressions. It seemed like you have 3 main expression on the market: the classic, the bottle and bond, and it seemed like you do have some finishes and other expression that come, but the classic and the bottle and bond are like your flagship. Which, I mean, you're following That's the only place I've seen you follow regular rules of all, bourbon makers having their flagship, having a bottle and bond because they're proud of the standard. I've had a barrel pick. That's what I've had of yours.
Mm.
But the person told me what I should look for is your cast strength and your weeding, because apparently those are phenomenal. The fact that I heard you talk corn, 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 and never even brought up weed makes me wonder the story behind that. But for all of you guys here, the classic is 95 proof, right? Is it 100% corn? What's the
Yep.
average maturation time on these?
Batch, you probably have batch 52 or so, I would
I
guess.
believe I have, yeah, batch 53 actually.
Okay. Yeah. So that's somewhat current. That matters with us. And that will tell you a lot about that kind of age range. We bumped up 4 to 4.5 years old.
Okay.
And then bottled and bond, we bumped up um, in that 5 year range.
Okay.
And why that matters is we make everything, and we moved into a new building in 2020, in February of 20, about 3 weeks before the world shut down. And so we made hand sanitizer for the first 3 months, and then we started making whiskey in that building on our new equipment with that line arm pot, all the new fermenters. So we were able to produce 6 barrels a day. So we have several thousand barrels now, and we've been holding the reins for years to say, okay, when we got, so like last year, we had 4-year-old whiskey finally, and we had 4-year-old whiskey. We had 4, 5, 6-year, 7. We released a 7-year, but it was so like 20 barrels. It wouldn't have been enough to like launch.
For public consumption. Yeah.
Right. So sort of that Sierra Nevada pale ale, if you, sort of
There's
that.
something funky on the nose here. That remind me of a barn.
Yeah.
It's fresh barn. That's that, like the funk on the nose here.
Yeah.
A little bit of that, but nice cinnamon, kind of sweet note, that honey sweetness obviously on the nose. I'm first time having the classic, so cheers.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is once we got to that place where we could have 4+ year old whiskey that was made in the same season, we said, let's celebrate that and launch bottled and bond. So we slowly pulled that out. And that's really when our kind of quote unquote pure expression, because we had a sherry finish, which you said sherry finished. So that was our first sort of segue to say, okay, now we have another label that's now a little older, consistent than so we established the classic, because forever it was just Jimmy Red. Then we added the classic. So we added the word classic, and then because that was what we started with. So then we had the bottled and bond. We did a double oak, sort of by not mistake, but we made peach brandy one year, and we would play around with different oak, how we finished it. So I said, this year, let's get some number one char barrels, virgin, and put the peach brandy in that. So we did that. Our yield was a barrel too low, though. So we had one extra char, one barrel. So I said, well, I'm not putting new whiskey in that. So let's put some stuff that's been in another barrel and
Put it in.
And this, yeah, and this was
I
when
love that
double.
you're not afraid to explore, because I mean, you're still small enough to not make huge mistakes, to actually
Right.
put 20 barrel of that, and then it's not what you actually are looking for. So
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we were, it's painful to not just, buy a truckload of grain from and just start laying down.
Correct.
But it just, we felt like this is a better way to do it, learn, and then kind of build that base and build on that. So with that said, we played around with wheat and we played around with rye as flavoring grains. And we've had multiple people come into the building because there again, Charleston's not a bad place to visit.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy named Bill Thomas, who owns Jack Rose in DC, got to be friends with us in 2015 and just really started watching what we were doing and was very interested in and a big supporter of it. And he came down and he was picking some single barrels and he tried. I said, well, here, try this wheated. And he tried it and he goes, I don't like it as much as I like the 100% corn. He's like, it's thin. It's just, he's like, I think the corn has more going on. And then we heard that because I was like, we aren't experts. We'll, what do people want?
Correct. Correct.
And so,
were you secretly trying to make Maker's Mark for your wife?
Well, it goes back a few years. We have a friend that's a chef, and he was a big Stitzel Weller fanatic and said, what do you think about making a batch with Jimmy Red, but to the original Stitzel recipe?
Correct.
And said, well, can you get that? And he texted Julian, and Julian gave us the rest of the mash bill, and we made some batches of that. And then Julian, we just happened to share a house with him around that time for an event in down south of here. And it was a food event, and they put Julian and Sissy and Ann and I and Andre Mack in the house together. Andre was there doing his wine.
Andre's good people. Yeah.
So we got to share the house with Andre and his brother and Julian and Sissy. So great house. And we were sitting up one night, Julian and I, and he said, this red corn, would you tell me about that? Would you send me a flask of the White Dog? And I said, sure. So I packed up a box when we got back and sent it over there. And he got the box. It was like on a Friday. And I walked back over to my desk, and we don't talk like regularly or anything, but I had his phone number. He had mine, and he had called me. I missed the call, and his text says, call me. So I call him back. He goes, hey, I just got your package and tried some of it. And I got to say, my mind's kind of blown. He goes, what's your flavoring grain, wheat or rye? And I said, it's 100% corn. And he goes, are you sure?
Correct.
And I said, yeah. Because there's a natural spiciness to the Jimmy Red, which that cinnamon you're picking up on, it's in the White Dog.
So which brings me to the question: classic versus cask strength. What do you do differently?
Nothing.
Okay, because I want to try the cask strength now that I tried the classic. This is the truth is barrel proof after all. So we need to taste this whiskey at cask to understand. For me, I always like higher proof, so I'm trying to the Jimmy Red cask strength. I don't know what the proof is on it because he doesn't have a proof. You didn't write a proof on, so I
think it's like 122.
Okay, just how I like it. Okay, see, now we talking. The funkiness is no longer funkiness. It is that banana, that ripe banana on the nose. The classic give me that funkiness, almost like I can already smell some of the grain. But the cask strength automatically is giving me those banana note, like ripe banana on the nose. Even the ethanol does not increase that cinnamon level.
Right.
It's like have you ever had a banana foster with cinnamon
Oh yeah.
dust on it. Yeah, so that's what the nose is like, of like flambe banana foster. That's the nose you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Mm,
Yeah. And I'm with you. I tend to drink whiskey that way. You know,
dude,
we,
now
yeah,
we talking. Now,
yeah,
you're giving me the little kid stuff. Now I'm a big boy now. You know,
right.
this right here is it is an experience in your mouth from the sweetness of those banana burnt banana flambe note to the middle, giving you that dust of cinnamon, finishing with some cacao and a little bit of clove. It doesn't even burn. Go. It does not drink like 120 at all.
No,
Zero. For me, I would have put it about 105 ish, at the most maybe 100. I say bottle and bond. It doesn't drink at all. That corn, it does not taste like corn, right? When you actually are tasting 100% corn whiskey, you know, because there's that creaminess from the corn, and it's like you know, but this tastes like you added something to it. So I
right.
understand why you get asked, what's your flavor and agent? Because it doesn't taste 100% corn, and it will be dangerous. Each year that pass, I'm pretty sure this will be a dangerous drink because of how I can only see it evolving with the oak and interacting with the oak. There will be so much things happening.
And to give you reference, that barrel, that cast strength barrel that you're drinking is about right at 4 years old. Yeah. So
So
we have some 6-year-old barrels um, that are 100% corn. Um, and
those I can only imagine the flavor
there
that
is,
comes off of that.
yeah. And so Sealbox, Blake has bought several barrels, and um, they had one barrel last year that was 6 years old that people flipped out, and they were like cream brulee, and it did of course the vanilla comes up more as it gets older, because that vanilla comes out of the barrel, and it just gets richer, almost like your bananas Foster, but you can imagine a little richer. And
Right.
we just tried some barrels the other day that are we put in new French oak barrels, so brand new char 3 French oak, and those barrels are spicy, but 138. Now our barrel entry is usually 108 to 110. So
Okay.
138 was just we don't usually see that. And those French oak barrels reacted differently with the spirit than the American oak. But does
So
these?
now I'm very curious about the experiment you did, because you sent me two different weeded, like a regular one and a batch four.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure what's the difference between those two.
yeah. One's I think batch 5, and one's batch 4. We did 3 this year, so we batch 4, batch 5, and batch 6.
I'm gonna do the batch
And
five.
we hadn't even released batch 6, I think, when I sent that out.
Okay.
I
Okay,
just
because now I want to see what's the percentage of wheat did you use to create the weeded.
Yeah, so it would have been somewhere between 12 and 16%. We that's a culmination of 20 barrels total. So it would have been,
Much darker,
yeah,
way darker than your regular
oh yeah,
corn.
yeah, 7 years old.
Oh,
And it blew people away. Um, and we were
ooh,
the
ooh.
some
This is
folks.
which type of wheat are you using? Are you using standard wheat? Is there a specific type of wheat? Because
We
the
originally used Sonoran white wheat, And I'll be perfectly honest. At this point, we were kind of playing around. That's every barrel was a little bit different from one another. It
I'm,
was
I'm telling you now is I've never tasted anything like this.
yeah, yeah,
I've never had any weeded bourbon like this ever. Like, if I didn't know any better, I understand what Julian was saying. If
yeah.
I didn't know any better, I could have swore this was like Weller 107,
Hmm.
the antique. Somebody could have fooled me for the antique 107 with this one,
Hmm.
because I think that's what made me fall in love with the antique was the fact that I can still get a little bit of that funkiness. I have a little bit of that sweetness coming through, but also the mouthfeel was perfect. And you get a little bit of that burn coming down. Whatever crazy experiment you're doing there, brother, is working,
Yeah,
because it's working, because I couldn't have guessed. Like, there's I'm already terrible at blinds, but there's no way I could have guessed this wasn't Weller 107. Be like, oh, that's Weller 107. That's what I would have said. It's
I mean, last year, or actually this year in August, the guys at SLB Drinks, they came in and they um, picked a couple of single barrels, and they were asking about the weeded because they had heard about it, and we didn't have any, and we really
of
didn't.
course you didn't have any. This is the best thing you're making out here. Everybody's will want a piece.
Yeah, so they got a bottle somewhere on the second when they got back home, and they did a blind with Pappy 15, Weller, um, one of the old Fits, and some of the makers Mark Seller, and ours won the blind, and then some folks in Portland, Oregon, followed suit, and ours won that blind, and then a guy in LA did it, and we there again people, and every time the response is always like, this is I've never had any, this is it was like, okay, this is different, and that was refreshing.
Even your double oak. I just poured a double oak, and I am floored by it. I will tell you honestly, I hate when someone hand me a double oak, because I always feel like it's almost like trying to fix a mistake.
Yeah,
But this tastes purposeful.
yeah,
Like the just the crispiness is giving me a little bit of that got cherry cola
hmm,
taste on the. I
yeah,
don't know. You turn me you turn me into all your products that are, for me, in my opinion, just those casting product, from your weeded to your castring to that. I, I almost feel like none of your products should have any water added to it. You're making such amazing whiskey. And
yeah,
I know not everybody like proof, and someone will want some classic and some bottle and bond. But for me, as any seasoned veteran that actually love their whiskey, you pack in so much flavor. It's like you punch people in their whiskey memory to go, hey, I need you to dig deeper
right.
to find something, because this is not like anything you've had before. So I thank you
Yeah,
for
no, I
for,
appreciate it. We're
for igniting something in me that usually I feel like which makes bourbon boring, because I feel a lot that bourbon can get boring, but to have something that is so traditionally left field, not left field only, but it's traditional, so you know where you are, but he still sparked something in you that matters to me. That makes it. That's what the new consumer of bourbon is looking for. Not your. It shouldn't be Jimmy Red. It should be, this is not your grandpa's bourbon.
right. Well, we we um I appreciate that. We're really at a place, we've worked very hard, kept our head down, and we are at an exciting place where we have waited and grown. we grew 575 acres of Jimmy Red. So we went from that 2 acres and scaled it up and got the farming practices in place. And then we are really discovering and sort of going, wow, this is a awesome like kind of base now that we've got to play with and explore. And as age starts to creep up, and we're going, wow, we thought that was good. This is so much better. And it's like, and it just is getting more and more interesting. One thing that we did that was really cool, nerding out a little bit here, but we've grown now with 7 partner farms all around this area, about 50 miles from, in this general vicinity of South Carolina. And we give them the seed, and then we do a contract for so much acreage, and we spread it around because of tornadoes and hurricanes. So we don't want to have it all at one farm and have it get destroyed. And so we've been going through the years, and we barrel by farm. So when you get a single barrel from us, it's a single farm. And so each barrel is from farm to farm, in our eyes, is different because we've tasted the white dog, and they're different from farm to farm. But what we didn't know if that was going to hold up with age. But the other week we decided to pull some single barrels for the tasting room, and we had 3 farms, and we had 4 barrels from each farm. So we tasted flights to pick one from each farm. And we had our team, everybody on our team was tasting. We were just going to vote and say, these are the 3 barrels we're going to put out on the shelves. And my wife lined up, she brought the bottles home, the little sample bottles, and we lined them up by farm, and we were tasting through. She tasted through, and then she took notes. We didn't talk about it. So she's sitting there watching me, and I'm tasting through the first ones, and I'm like, wow, spicy, spice bombs, cinnamon, red hots, that kind of thing. And then I get to the second one, and it's like creme brulee, vanilla, custard. And then I get to the third one, and I put it up, and it smells like peanuts. And then I'm tasting through, and it's like peanut brittle, like, caramel and nuts. And I'm like, and they weren't all identical, but they all had that common flavor profile.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my God, these different farms taste different, after 5 years.
Correct.
And so we were like, and they're not growing that far apart in the state. And they're, semi-similar, sandy, loamy soil, that kind of thing. So we're sort of in that place now where we're getting really excited about what are the possibilities here. So classic is a batch of, you don't call it a blend in American whiskey because that's a bad word, but a batch or mingle or whatever in our typical batch size. You want to talk about small batch, ours is 5 barrels usually. So we batch 5 barrels together, maybe 7. Our tank holds 10. That's the max we can do. But typically we're batching 5 barrel batches. So we're really excited about, sort of that palette that it gives us to play with, because you can imagine some vanilla, some nuts, and some.
No, there's. So are you just out of curiosity, are you maybe in the future considering having a master blender? Maybe look at these different type of things coming to you and blending it together to kind of create something that may, kind of wow the folks, since there's so much nuances happening in your whiskey. I can see it already on different batches already of your weeded and even the cast strength. I can already see that. Is that an idea floating or not?
Oh yeah, no, we're I wouldn't say we have a tiger by its tail, but there's a lot to explore, which is
Correct.
fun, and we just are learning more. We malted last last year. We malted some Carolina Gold rice, so we took 100% rice and malted it at a malt house up in North Carolina to Munich malt level. So, you've kind of got like, crystal malt, and then the next level, and Munich is somewhere just a little, it's not super heavy malt. Sort of a light toast, if you will. Um, we made a batch, we put it in the barrel, and we pulled some the other day. Mind blowing.
All right.
Smell.
That's already that you guys need to keep an eye on them to make sure you know what's happening. Don't give too much away. I would love to actually. I want people to actually go. One question that came up is somebody wanted to know if your bottle and bond are all blended together, or is it from different farms that those are coming. They're coming to.
Those are batch. So we haven't, to be perfectly honest, this discovery of these single barrels being that vastly different, because every barrel is a little different from one another.
Correct.
But we weren't really tracing it by farm. It was Blake at Sealbox and David Jennings that were at the distillery, and they were tasting, and we had told them.
DJ actually came on. He was the first to come on and say hello.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, there he is. So David and Blake were tasting, and they were like, and David said, "You can't break that setup, Blake. Those farms, that set belongs together. So it's really cool because they're very different from one another, but they sort of fit." And we were like, we don't even do that for ourselves. Maybe we should start doing the farm thing. So it really has become this fascination now we just are scratching the surface. And so there's a whole deep dive. And we also have a second barrel warehouse. So we have a downtown, we're in downtown Charleston. We've got a few hundred barrels there, but we have a second warehouse up at the naval base right on the water, and it's got 44 windows and it's ambient. And we built proper.
I can only imagine the type of barrels and flavors that have come out of there too.
And so we're sort of we don't know.
You literally are in the playground anymore. You it's almost like wait to see what comes out of, out of Jimmy Red, because out of High Wire Distillery, because I almost can't pinpoint yet. And I think you have that room for that margin to play with what you want, and to hope that obviously things work out the way you want to. And I guess right now you're still small enough. The question most people want to know is always ask is distribution. How can people get their hands on those bottles? We've talked about your story. People have heard who you are, who you and Ann are, how you came about this. Clearly, you're not a corporation trying to gouge anybody for anything. You're just average guy, just like all of us, that just wanted to do something that they believe in, and it shows in your spirit. Where can people find the bottle?
Well, last year we typically relied on other partners, retail partners, to put it online and sell it and ship it. We can't ship, but what we did is we connected with a marketing company out of Texas that has, sort of like, all these different companies do it. They have a contract with retailers in a few different locations, and we just happen to be with one in DC. So if you go on our website, highwiredistilling.com, we have a shop. You go there and you shop, and it's got the array of what we have, and you see your state listed as ability to receive it, and you can buy it there. And that retailer, it looks like it's us, but it's coming from that guy out of DC. You can also buy a few things from folks like Sealbox, Bourbon Outfitters, Astor Wine and Spirits in New York, Longhorn out of Texas. There's some different retailers that ship. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but if you do a search, Wine Searcher or something, you'll find some spots. We've seen a lot of traffic. It's really sort of shown us what people. Like most craft distilleries, we don't have distribution everywhere. We're in New York, we're in DC, Maryland, Delaware, we're in South Carolina, of course, and Georgia and Texas, but we're not everywhere, and they don't have everything. So that's where typically that online piece really is a conduit to be able to. You see the peach brandy, for instance. We don't distribute that far and wide. David Jennings can tell you it's pretty unique and pretty special. I think it's as cool as the Jimmy Red is. It's just peach brandy, not whiskey.
No, I because I had a couple people. Obviously, my audience is above the U.S. that immediately asked. The first question they ask is, "Would this ever be available in Europe?" I feel like bourbon is the new thing everywhere in Europe, and I think as we know the market now, most people are waiting for those tariffs to kind of settle down a little bit so they can explore the market. So Scott doesn't have to answer that. I've interviewed enough brand and understand the business enough to understand how that works. Uh, I have two questions before we close this interview. The first question always is, you're playing a lot with so many flavors. If somebody has been a Jimmy Red fan, and I've seen you through, I've seen even a 10-year anniversary, have had your barrels in the next year or two, what should they look forward to? What should the average Jimmy Red fan look forward to? Is there something set in stone that you can divulge to the
Well,
average Jimmy Red lover?
One of the things that we do that I think is a fan favorite that is limited, and when it comes out, it's a great thing to grab, and that's our peach brandy finished Jimmy Red. So what we do is we take those peach brandy barrels after we dump them, and we put Jimmy Red in those peach brandy barrels. It's pretty remarkable. And usually we're talking like 2 or 3 barrels. So it's because when we make peach brandy, it takes about 16,000 pounds of peaches to make 4 or 5 barrels. So that's what we don't, it's expensive. It's a lot of work. And we don't, it's just, people say, why don't you make more peach brandy? It's like,
it's a lot of work.
A lot, and it's expensive. And we already pay for the Jimmy Red. We don't pay commodity. We're paying 7 times commodity because we want these farmers taking care of it and incentivized to do a good job, because it's a special crop and it's different. It's not, you don't just plant it and forget it, and can't hit it with the Roundup and all the stuff, the playbook. You gotta be a little bit more adventurous. So that's already expensive, but peach brandy is really expensive. So, but that peach brandy finish, people who know us love that one. I would think cast strength, stay tuned. We've not really made a big splash with that in a stable way, I would say, or, core line offering per se. It's not something that you can just go to the store and get. Those are usually single barrels. And then Our rye is a bit of a sleeper hit.
I don't even know the rice, so I couldn't. I've never heard of it. I
Yeah,
couldn't tell you what I know about it.
it's the stepchild right now. I mean, we're purposely sort of keeping it underground because we have something that we're releasing next year. You talked about what is something, so we're working on something with that right now. And I mean, we tasted some 5-year-old rye today. Um, it's pretty exciting, and it's very unique. Just like it's in a Brutzy rye, so it's a different type of rye, and it grows around here. Most of the guys are growing it for cover crop and windbreak and cattle feed and stuff like that. But it's kind of a puny. It doesn't grow like rye like out where you are. You know,
Yeah,
we don't get that good cold hard winter where you can get wheat and rye. Um, so, um, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, we're what we figured out was there's so much exploration with Jimmy Red. We just need to doggedly focus and make that better and better and better. And let's use that innovative spirit and innovation energy to sort of learn and kind of evolve that. I think when you try classic in a year, it's going to be better.
correct.
When you try bottled in bond in a year, it's going to be better. I
Yeah,
mean, so it just, but we're pretty happy with where we are today. But that's sort of the curse of whiskey as
yeah.
the maker. We're like, yeah, but wait till
Wait
we're
till yeah,
like, this is great right now. It's like, yeah, but wait. And it's like a bad, you don't want to say it. You don't want to say
correct,
that. So, but
correct.
I enjoy drinking other people's whiskey. It's more relaxing for me. It's more fun. I love
It's less pressure.
and I love seeing what other folks are doing. I'll tell you what has been really fun, and folks like you sort of shining a light on producers that's the cool thing about American whiskey. You get caught up in chasing these bottles of legacy brands. There's nothing wrong with legacy brands. Awesome. There's a lot of beautiful brands out there doing really great things. But if that's all you're doing, you're missing so much more.
You're missing a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're missing so much. There's so much happening. What you're doing right now, for me, in my opinion, is definitely the I mean, there's so much to discover. The best part of whiskey is discovery, is is finding things that are happening in the industry that are literally are so cool, and you are missing out on all those things if you think it's only gonna you have to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Um, but last but not least, if my camera actually agrees with me, last but not least, the last question I have is: we heard you. Actually, quick question. Somebody wanted to know if you guys are in Houston, and I'm not sure in
We are.
Texas.
We're at Specs on Smith
Spec.
Street. Yeah, downtown. We're also in some other stores there. I can't name off the top of my head yet, but
Right.
we
So
are we are
I
in
will,
Houston.
I will. And if you guys have any question, this is your opportunity to ask before we close. But the last question is: you build this thing from the ground up. You and your wife sacrifice and put this thing. I'm only privileged to have these pores in front of me and seeing the fruit of your labor. How can we help? From whiskey consumers to people that want to watch this later or listening to the recast on my podcast. How can we help? If
Yeah.
you had a wish for us to actually um, maybe highlight the work you're doing, not necessarily because we want to make you famous or anything, but
Yeah.
how can we help?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple stuff. It's like buy it, share it, tell people about it. It's fun. It's like anything else. I love sharing great wine and telling people about makers that we know and turning friends on to something that maybe they've not heard of before. That we would love that. And then if you're in Houston or you're in a state that I mentioned, New York, DC, Delaware, Maryland, Georgia, South Carolina, and it's not in your store you go to, ask that retailer why not. You should have this. It's just that groundswell is everything. And then if you get a bottle of it and you love it, post it online and tag us. And that means the world to us. We had a great Instagram post today, sort of to your point earlier. This woman had never heard of it. She, thought corn, um, and she said it totally surprised me. And she went on and on and on about it, and it was like that's a that is a massively fun thing to hear and see, and she's sharing that now. So that's what we need,
I
and
will tell you guys right now, if you're here, I showed you the website, but if you have not seen what the website is, it is highwiredistilling.com. It's highwiredistilling.com. That's HIGHWIREDISSSTILLING. If you have your immigrant Tourette's like me, just make sure you check out. Just put high wire distilling wherever the hell you put it. They'll be the one to come. Or just put in Jimmy Red bourbon, and you'll see everything that came out of there. Um, I will tell you this, and I say this with a true passion. You are the inspiration to everyone that truly a believer. So I heard somebody once say to be an entrepreneur is to be a crazy and demented believer, because you don't know if it's gonna work, or you don't know if it's even gonna is a good idea, but you wake up every day and still um, jump into the insanity bowl and hope that you come the other side unscathed. So I appreciate you. I think s- having your spirit now tastes much sweeter, knowing the sweat equity and the sacrifice that went into it. Um, we not a lot of people get to see a brand in their infancy, even though you've been around since 2012. I really believe you truly in your infancy, and you only gonna grow from there. I want to remind everybody is Highwire Distillery or Jimmy Red. I need you to talk to your rep. Need you to talk to every representative that come talk to you about bourbon, to ask them. Go to your favorite store and ask, hey, can we get Jimmy Red in here? Because I promise you, if you listen to this or watching the recast, you have not had anything like this before. You just haven't. Scott, thank you so much for making time this evening, talking to me. You have a new fan in me. You have a new advocate that will go out there and tell people you should probably try Jimmy Red, um, and you can thank me later. That's what I will be telling people. I'm glad somebody introduced me to it, and I've had a good, and now we are having this conversation. I think there's more. I believe you're gonna do more things that are gonna surprise us. I can't wait to see what the future holds. Any last words?
no, man, that I can't thank you enough. This has been really fun, and I really appreciate it. It means a lot, everything you've said, and we need it. We need, it's, we even though, you think, like you said, it doesn't make my head swell. It just makes me want to work harder, and we're really grateful. And yeah, no, this has been a real pleasure. And let's keep in touch.
No,
We got
absolutely. No, you me even if you try. So I truly I truly wanna see you again. I want to make sure that we had the opportunity to chat. I cannot wait for what the future holds um, here, and I, I really um, want to make sure that we keep in touch. And if new expressions comes on the market, make this is your home now. Let's come here. Let's talk about it. Um, Great things to you and the family. I I know you're gonna have success in the future. There's no need to wish it for you because I know you are. Just keep being crazy, keep being adventurous, and hopefully we're gonna see some things in the market that we never seen before. On that note, I would say